right, a little bit early, but after a long day, I'm sure it's better that we get started sooner rather than later. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes to read the rather small print on the screen. Actually, I'm only joking. No one has to read this. This is really just standard fare. It's a safe harbor statement saying whatever I discuss in this room has impact on our forward-looking business, and that we won't be held accountable. We won't be held to the exact statements, but I'm going to try my best to give you a little bit of a roadmap discussion, and I'll get into exactly how I'm going to approach that. So my name is Dean Schonknecht. I've been with Magento and now Adobe pretty much since March last year, when Magento, prior to the acquisition by Adobe, started hiring into Asia, into APAC. I was the first employee here in Singapore. We built out the team across Singapore, Hong Kong, India, down to Australia, and we've got probably about 16 folks that were employees at the time of acquisition by Adobe. So my discussion with you today is going to try and be relatively cognizant of time, because I don't want to be the guy standing between you and some networking drinks. If there's some time for Q&A, you're more than welcome to throw some questions from the audience. I'll answer them as best I can, or come and grab me after the event. But this was a tough presentation to come up with, and I'll tell you why. Because you've reached Meet Magento, a fantastic event, and at a really interesting time. And I'll talk about why it's interesting and why it made this presentation tough. But I think first of all, just thank you to Analyst again. If the folks throughout the day haven't said it, I just wonder if they have a repeat. This whole event, Analyst is a partner that I work with here in Singapore. I actually suggested to them, I said, we've never run a Meet Magento in Singapore. Wouldn't it be great if you guys, as one of our leading partners in Singapore, came and actually, so I put them in touch with the Meet Magento organization. They, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of risk. It's a lot of, any event you put on, it's a bit like hosting a party or, your own birthday at home. You're kind of worried, are people going to turn up? Am I going to look silly? Am I getting embarrassed? Have I overcated? Have I undercated? I just want to say, Rannis's team, you've done an amazing job. I think Singapore was seriously lacking on the Meet Magento map, and I'm really glad you guys have put it on. This event is community or partner driven, so I just want to say thank you. I'm very proud that, as one of our partners, you've put this on. At the same time, you've put me in a really tough spot talking about at the time we were at, the juncture we were at, and I think it's good because this discussion needs to happen. We've had a really interesting time around Magento as a brand, as a product, with the acquisition, and so I'm going to try my best to cover off. This presentation is kind of, I feel it's in football, if anyone watches British, EPL or, Premier League football, there's always a saying that commentators use, a game of two halves, right? So the first half can look completely different to the second half, depending on which team is doing better. And sometimes you go, wow, how would they do so well in the first and completely fell away in the second? So, this presentation is really a presentation of two halves. I'm going to try and cover a little bit about what was the Magento roadmap and is the Magento roadmap as it stands today, but also give you some insights into how we're now working as part of Adobe, what that means, and a lot of it is sort of less product focused and more strategically focused in the second half. So without further ado, I'll get into what I think is some of the content that pertains. So first things first, a little bit of a history lesson. If some of you folks have not been at a Meet Magento event, or if you haven't been to, we had our large customer conference in Vegas in March, or in April, I should say, and then we've had Meet Magento Live, our own events that we run. Some of this may have come up in previous presentations, but I wanted to take you on just a little bit of before we look forward, let's look in terms of back a little bit, because you kind of got to understand the history, and a lot of you folks have been with the Magento brand, you've been with Magento as a product, you've implemented it, so you'll know some of this history, but it's worth recapping that Magento is only 10 years old, 11 this year. And what started as a sort of a project out of an agency that saw the requirement for commerce and then open sources, and it went and the product was sound enough that people decided to build on it, and open source sort of took the product from relatively small to a scale that no one could have really believed. So from that origin in 11 years, it's actually a massive amount of change and momentum. Obviously, there was a period where we were a part of the eBay family, where eBay, obviously, doing commerce, thought about Magento as a great platform for its merchants. And then, obviously, during that time, there was a lot of product innovation that happened, but ultimately didn't fit with their long-term strategy. And I think most people would agree was actually a blessing in disguise for the brand, for the Magento brand, for its customers. But Magento didn't stop going, right? So we spun out in late 2015. We were private equity held. And you'll see on the bottom, you'll see some of the product innovation that's happened since Magento 2. We went to the cloud. We had order management. We've had various business intelligence acquisitions of RJ Metrics. We've had the B2B functionality really come into the 2.2 release. So I won't read all the different product innovation to you, but most of you will know a lot has happened even just since late 2015, early 2016, which is only 2 and a bit years. So where we're at now is, well, actually just January 2017 was for me a pivotal moment, specifically for Magento, but also in Asia Pacific, because Hill House Capital, which is one of the early investors in Tencent, obviously put money in and decided that Magento had not only a great future, but a great future specific to Asia Pacific. So that's why I joined in sort of February, March of that year. And then just a year and a half later, Adobe had decided that we were a great acquisition for their strategy, and I'm going to talk about their overall strategy. So an amazing journey is what I just wanted to highlight here, but also, it's a relatively short amount of time in the 2.5 years that Magento has been an independent company again, and now we're going into, I think, a great product company. Adobe is a fantastic software company in many respects, and I'm going to try and highlight, what that means going forward. But before I do, I just wanted to touch on, assuming the Adobe acquisition had never happened, this is our stated product roadmap as of this current fiscal quarter. And just really not go into any of the details. Frankly, I'm not a deep technical product guy, but some of these innovations are worth touching on at a high level because they're still being developed. The acquisition is only 12, 14 weeks old. Some of these product roadmap features and plans were set and continue to be, the acquisition hasn't disrupted them. And I think I want to just talk to you about some of the highlights of what's coming in the Magento roadmap as of this current quarter, and will be released in the version that comes out before the end of this year. So just to understand how Magento's product team has been doing its roadmap priorities and deciding what to focus on, there's 3 distinct pillars. So the first one is making sure that as a commerce platform, the actual core shopping experience is, first class, personalized, gives consumers and merchants what they need in terms of, selling online. The second one is obviously allowing that merchant to sell everywhere, the purchaser to buy everywhere, to have a fulfill omni-channel and omni-selling fulfillment experience. And the last one is giving the people using Magento the ability to understand what is actually going on in their store online, to streamline operations, to price and promote their products so that they can obviously drive profitability. So these 3 pillars continue to be Magento's guiding principles for product development roadmap. And obviously underpinned by all of that is the fantastic work that the open source community has done, the fact that we want to be operationally, world-class, low total cost of ownership. We want the ecosystem of technology partners, solution partners to continue to be what drives the underpinnings of the Magento platform. So let me quickly get into, under each one of those headings, there's a couple of key features that you may have probably heard about. Under the shopping experience, you probably realize that the next release, version 2.3, we're going to natively integrate what we now call Page Builder, which was previously known as the Bluefoot extension for content management. So that's going to be natively integrated in. It's available as an extension today, but obviously that will be built into the product. Progressive web apps, we're doing a lot of work with Google and others on the mobile experience for a superior shopping experience. And also advanced site search. Selling and fulfillment. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think is an amazing innovation that we're doing around helping merchants sell on multiple platforms, specifically marketplaces, and Google as a shopping experience. We have a little bit of a touch on some of the order management innovation we're doing around sourcing simulation. And on the business intelligence or the merchant intelligence side, we're now getting really deep and specific on certain types of intelligence that once we have customer feedback, specific analytics and intelligence around, for example, order management, around business-to-business features. So those are the three pillars in general that have guided the Magento roadmap to date. And again, there's a general foundation that has to be operationally sound. We've, implemented a lot of new tools around cloud. Recently, there was an update around some of open sourcing some of the developer specific cloud deployment tools, and making obviously the architecture continuing to be modular and scalable and flexible. So typically how the product team plans and builds is they look at, any product or feature in those categories and they go, when are we going to do it? Are we going to do it now? Is it super urgent? We need to do it right now. They're going to do it in the next release, or is there something that is future that we need to put on the roadmap and we'll get to it as and when as the time and the demand allows. So, in that vein, if you look at the core commerce roadmap, what we're focused on right now is obviously the page builder. There's Magento shipping enhancements. There's the Amazon sales channel. I'm going to talk about it in a bit more detail. We're launching Magento payments in the US. I've spoken about progressive web apps. In planning for next, we're looking at further enhancements around PWA and native shopping experiences. We're looking at further advertising and sales channels. The one that I think probably pertains to the second half of my presentation around Adobe Analytics integration with our BI tool, further deeper integration. We're also looking at, in the future, obviously, more B2B enhanced features beyond 2.3, and just general overall modular architecture enhancements. So that's, at a snapshot, the core commerce roadmap. Again, I'm not going to go into all the detail here around order management, but again, this is a slightly different product for us because it's truly a SaaS offering as opposed to our PaaS or on-premise solution on the core commerce side. So the thinking and the product team and everything is slightly different around order management. You can see some of the features here around, much more granular, intelligent pick listing, customizable, roles and permissions, access control lists. So the order management roadmap is pretty robust, but pretty distinctly separate from the core commerce because, frankly, those products don't need to be deployed together. And on the BI side, again, you'll see, I'm not going to go into detail about BI, but we do have Adobe Analytics integration today. That's getting stronger. We have non-date cohort-based reporting. And going forward, there's going to be more specifics in BI around B2B, and then also being able to report on additional features that are integrated into the platform, like the tech partners integrations that we have. So let me get into just a couple of these features that I think are worth calling out. So if you're working with Magento today, and you're not aware of, or if you're not talking to your customers about, or if you're not approaching Magento or the Adobe folks that to get early access, you should be, because these are key ones that I think are going to change the game for us. The reason being, the first one is around our, what we call Magento sales channels. I think it's a little bit generically named, but generally anyone who's selling on a brand.com site using Magento, their own commerce site, is probably, in fact, the data shows us 60% of folks are also doing marketplace commerce. The one that we focus on first and foremost is obviously Amazon, because it's the biggest one. It's US first and foremost, and there's obviously other international deployments. But for me, the exciting part about this is once this framework is done, it allows us to move to Rakuten, to Lazada, to any regional, once we have the baseline framework, and to sync your product data around what you're doing on your website with what you're doing on the marketplace. And if you've only been on a marketplace and you now want to deploy a site, a Magento Commerce website, fantastic. You can actually save time and pull all that marketplace data back into your Magento product catalog. So there's some fantastic innovation around this. It's in early adopter program right now, so this is that first phase, that right now pillar of the roadmap. You know, get in touch if you want to, and I think that'll be available in this release before the end of the year. I think early next year we're going to have the Google Sales channel. If you're selling via Google's sales marketplace as well, there'll be integration with that coming in early 2019. But this is something which I think if anyone is looking at marketplaces should be getting in touch, and at least if looking at how this can apply to the marketplaces. And we need you guys to raise up the marketplaces. There's about 80 marketplaces globally in the world. There's no way Magento is going to build integrations for every single one of those. We're probably going to have a framework where our technology partners, our solution partners can actually take what we've done with Amazon and roll that out to different marketplaces around the world. The page builder I've spoken about as well. This is a big one. Somewhat the worst kept secret because the Bluefoot extension was always out there. It's been available, still continues to be made available as an extension. The key thing here is that we're updating it, we're making it native to the core, and obviously, you know, this fills a big need. Why? Because most merchants we know, even if it's not product specific, it's promotions, it's branding, they're making continual updates to their sites, and doing it via code or doing it via development team is less than optimal. So Magento merchants have been crying out for this. Progressive web apps, again, no one is to be told the importance of mobile. I'm not going to bore you with statistics and data, not least in Asia or APAC generally, but in collaboration with Google, we're putting a huge amount of importance around progressive web apps to make sure that merchants have an optimized mobile experience. Why not an application or an app store? There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, which we can get into more detail. We probably won't have time, but this is the next evolution of a mobile browser, you know, displaying your site in a mobile browser. We all know the challenges that comes with. You don't maintain states, you don't have all the features necessarily displaying correctly. So this is the closest thing to not having to build and go through an app store and have all the restrictions around selling via a mobile app, a native app. Being able to have a progressive web app version which acts and feels exactly like a native app, but has all the flexibility and the speed. And so there's amazing examples of this which we can get into further if you come and pull me aside after this session. I think it was really interesting. Mark Scott was on stage earlier. He was talking about how even before we had B2B features in our 2.2 release, you know, people were using Magento for B2B. So, you know, I think we're continuing to want to tap into that requirement. In fact, you know, I think there's only a handful of maybe one or two vendors that really serve the B2B space really well. We continue to want to, you know, you'll see some of the, you know, the innovation we're doing here around access control lists, around, you know, large scaling of catalogs, around, you know, I think, you know, threshold approvals, workflow within the B2B context. There's a lot of, as you dig into B2B, as you guys will know, there's a lot here which is very specific that needs to be kind of customized to a B2B buying workflow. And this is the kind of segue. If you remember that slide I had first up front was Adobe and Magento sort of changing the world. This is a segue into, well, we were always thinking about, like, how do we integrate with, you know, experience more, you know, fully integrated and fully fledged experience platforms like Adobe. Magento had and we'll talk about it as we go through this, we had an integration with Adobe even prior to the acquisition. So, you know, we're going to continue to build on that. I'll talk about the Adobe vision for commerce, but some of the things I think you're going to see straight away is, you know, Adobe talks about, if anyone had the pleasure of attending Adobe Symposium last week here in Singapore, I was there the week before in Sydney as well. They talk about making every experience shoppable. One of the ways you do that is you have Magento, or the shopping experience delivered by Magento, embedded into Adobe Experience Manager, which is their web content and experience solution. So that's one of the things we're going to see. We're going to see Adobe Target, which does the testing and optimization and personalization of web content and mobile content. That's going to have optimization specific for commerce built into it, and vice versa. We're going to have Adobe Analytics, which is the old Omniture, if anyone remembers that name. The website analytic tool, again, specific analytic data you want to pass back to your commerce, from your commerce solution. There's going to be specifics developed around that. I think what Adobe's doing around Sensei as an artificial intelligence, we saw some amazing demos last week at Symposium. I think this is something which most of the commerce vendors out there have realized that, there's an amazing opportunity to give commerce a more, it's almost like a shot in the arm around, what the merchant and both the merchant and the consumer can realize in terms of automation, smart shopping experiences. So we're going to see a lot of Sensei machine learning coming into Magento. And then just generally, one of the things that, when people were doing very advanced level commerce, you're dealing with a lot of content and a lot of assets, and no one is better at the content game and the asset management game than Adobe with its AEM, and even on the content side with its Photoshop and what they call the content cloud business that they have. So this takes me right back to just the acquisition itself. The thing to note, I think you'll see our branding is going to be updated. So for the near term, we're going to be called Magento and Adobe Company. You'll see the logos there have been changed slightly. Our website has been changed, our email signatures. You'll see that over there, you'll see that we are now part of the Digital Experience Cloud. In fact, the next slide talks about the Adobe Experience Cloud, the digital experience business, they call it internally. And this is actually not live yet. This is just a mock-up of what the Adobe website will look like. But Magento will fit, and the commerce piece will fit as part of the overall Adobe Experience Cloud. So what does this mean in terms of vision and strategy, and how's Adobe viewing Magento, and how's Magento viewing Adobe? The one thing that, again, I'll keep coming back to Symposium because we spent a lot of time with customers, both Magento existing and Adobe customers who aren't Magento, and the product teams and the sales teams, as you do at these events. And the one thing that kept coming through is Adobe talks about being an experience company. So you're going to see this a lot in our product marketing, I believe, on the Magento side. It already is deeply infused into the Adobe side. But everything that Adobe is focused on making experiences that are easy, intuitive. I think Nicholas spoke this morning around the future of customer experience. This is why we're talking about it. This is why we were talking about it even before this is so important that we keep the customer in mind. They need to be, the commerce experience particularly needs to be easy and intuitive, high value, short on time. It needs to be relevant, personalized, and they don't care what channel or touch point that they're engaging your brand. And I think no more important than commerce. I mean, commerce is the ultimate, from a brand perspective, it's the ultimate trust between a consumer and the brand. I'm giving you my money. I'm not just browsing your content. I'm not just, reading up on something. I'm not just, maybe, dabbling on your product catalog. I'm actually at the point of sale. I'm going to give you my brand and I expect something in return. So nowhere more is, I believe, the whole concept of people buy experiences and not products more important. Because it doesn't help if I can buy the product relatively easily, but the shipping and return is broken. It doesn't help if I buy the product, but I got a different price online and I actually walk into the store the next day and it's 10% cheaper. So it's fine to have efficient commerce, and I'm going to talk about what I call good enough commerce in a bit. But this is the way that Adobe and I think Magento were very aligned around. We need to make sure we keep the customer and the end customer experience at the forefront. So Nicholas spoke about this morning. So Adobe, this by the way is all Adobe content. This was not Adobe content that needed to be updated when we acquired Magento. They've been talking about customer experience and behavior and expectations for the last 3 or 4 years. So they talk about the consumer always being on and connected. We know that they thrive on these experiences if you don't just give them a point transactional or experience. We know that, Nicholas said it this morning, people don't care. I'm in the retail channel, therefore I must have a different experience. They don't care that I'm on my mobile device, and when I go back to my desktop, I'm going to see they don't want to see something different. They want to have it optimized, but they don't want to think about, I've got to understand the context of where I'm engaging with your brand. And I think Nicholas made this point as well. There's no such thing as customer loyalty anymore. Every time, every transaction, every experience is the opportunity for the brand to build and to reinvigorate that loyalty. So these were Adobe principles underpinned by the fact that people just have less time and they're more likely to have fleeting and fleeting attention. So, attention spans are dropping. No more, evident if you look at just mobile data. Everyone talks about mobile being where everyone is and how the engagement is, everything happens on mobile. But even on mobile, that time and attention is dipping. So these are things that Adobe was thinking about and is still thinking about, and Magento will continue to be part of that thought process. But here's the thing. You guys know it. You're all in this room because you have an interest or a business or a customer, or you are engaged in commerce in some way, shape, or form. And experiences, people tend to think about, I went to a great landing page and I saw the Audi, I'm going to pick an example out there, the great Audi car configurator, and I was able to configure the model I wanted, and then I kind of, I left it and I went back. Maybe I went back, maybe I didn't. The point is, you can deliver a great experience. Commerce is really, really hard, because at that point, it comes back to that point I was saying where to actually give someone your money, that point of trust, whether it's online or offline, the processes that you go through, you guys know there's payment gateway integrations, there's order and fulfillment integrations, there's localization integration. So the business of commerce, without any disrespect to anyone who was building websites that were more brochureware, this is a lot harder. So a lot of the agency partners I work with come up to me and the new ones that want to get into commerce, they struggle with this because it's no longer just, I'm going to throw up a website, put a great experience together. The commerce and the complexity behind commerce is much more challenging. And Adobe felt that they were really good at experiences, but they were missing this critical piece of the end-to-end story. So let's dive into this end-to-end story. So I don't know if you can see very well there, but Adobe views, and I think this is still a very relevant view, the consumer journey starts, somewhere around being aware of a product or a brand. They then go through a discovery. They may be ready to shop. They may be ready to give you their money. And then after they've given you money, they have an expectation and a fulfillment need. So let's break down, I think I spoke about this term, good enough commerce. There's a lot of, especially in Asia Pacific, varies by market, but there's a lot of what I call good enough commerce out there. Almost despite themselves, people are selling and fulfilling using an online channel. Maybe people find your brand on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. They get an ad. Maybe they then get intrigued. They go search on the marketplace. How much is the product? Who sells the cheapest? Maybe they go to your website. They then do a little bit more research. They find out if they can go to a store or a dealership, if it's a car. So they're in the sort of shopping phase, and then they're ready to give you money. And these things are sort of disjointed, right? There's no one actually talking to them in a consistent set of languages, consistent set of data. That I'm the same guy that came to your website, that walked into that car dealership, that eventually goes to your spares and service department to buy accessories. So that whole consumer journey has been pieces that have been fulfilled, but there's a lot of that's just not a really great customer experience. Adobe's vision, and I think Magento's is very aligned with this, is that we're going to have experience-driven commerce. If you put the consumer at the heart of this, we create these experiences, and experiences are complex because buyer journeys, buyer behaviors, buyer expectations involve a lot of different touch points, and those, unlike the bottom there, need to be connected. So what's Adobe going to do? Let's look at how they view these different phases of awareness, discovery, shopping, purchasing, and actual post-purchase behavior. So we break down each one of these. So again, let me use a personal example on the fly. I hadn't actually planned on using one, but I recently decided as maybe, let's call it a midlife crisis, I wanted to buy a motorbike again. True story. So my awareness, during this phase of awareness, there were certain brands that I knew of, maybe from historical perspective that I'd known through my childhood. Maybe there were certain brands that I saw on billboards or dealerships I'd ridden past, but somehow I knew about the brand. Now, there's a whole set of technologies and tools in the software world that prior to Magento, that Magento was not involved in, but Adobe is. They've got fantastic solutions around advertising in all these different channels so that ultimately the goal is the customer knows about your brand, feels good about your brand. In my case, I settled on 2 brands. I wanted to either buy a Harley-Davidson or a Triumph. They were the 2 brands that stood out in my mind that potentially they were good brands as far as motorbikes went. By the way, I don't know if this example is going to run all the way through because I hadn't actually planned on giving you a personal experience, but let me keep going with it. So I was in discovery phase, right? So at this point, I'm looking for something, or the brand has the opportunity to trigger me to be a shopper. I'm actually going to give him my money. So at this point, there's a whole bunch of, again, the channels are there. I might be doing some searches. I might be going to their own brand.com site. I might be not so good, a good example for marketplaces because I think most people wouldn't buy a motorbike on Amazon or maybe an eBay. Maybe I'm still seeing TV ads, but at this point, the goal of the brand is to say, I understand why I need this product and why it meets my goals. So at this point, I have the 2 brands, and I'm trying to choose between Harley-Davidson and a Triumph. Now at this point, this is still discovery, and the shopping experience is not, I haven't concluded my shopping experience. But what I want to do is, I want to make a decision. So I'm doing things like I'm looking at brochures, I'm going to the dealer, I'm looking online, I'm reading reviews, I'm looking at YouTube videos. But at this point, I still need to be engaged as a consumer. This is where it gets really interesting. This is where Magento had typically played, at the point of I'm ready to buy. So at this point, I'm now refining. I've decided, no, it's not a Harley-Davidson, it's a Triumph. So my Triumph decision is now, okay, which model, which color, do they have the accessories that I want for it? Is it available in my local dealership? So I'm actually actively engaged in refining my shopping decision-making process. And at this point, I may go into the physical channel, I might go into the digital channel. Again, I don't really care as a consumer. I'm engaging with the Triumph brand. And then this is the moment of truth when it comes to, most people think about e-commerce. I'm now ready to give you my money, and I'm going to check out. In my example, again, not necessarily the best example, because I didn't purchase my motorbike online, but at this point, in theory, if the dealer had a commerce, by the way, the dealership in Singapore has a really poor commerce experience, maybe we should have a chat with them, but there was no ability for me to purchase online, configure online. The configurator was the UK website. There was no way for me to order my parts and accessories, which I wanted to customize the motorbike. So a massive opportunity, a good example of the brand that could have actually been using commerce and a Magento website potentially. And then linking that up with my experience when I walked into the store. So this is the moment of truth. I'm ready to give you my money, but I want it to be smooth. I want it to be easy. I want that configurator choice I chose online to be ready when I come into the dealership. So, this is where we say good commerce or commerce done really well as an experience is hard. It's really tough because you're talking about CRM systems, offline data, display ads that may or may not got served to me, product recommendations and reviews that may or may not have known that I've viewed. Linking these things together, and this is the reason I'm taking the time to go through this is that imagine Magento as a standalone commerce brand trying to serve all these requirements. Frankly, we couldn't. We could do this piece around maybe some of the shopping, getting the catalog online, maybe getting some promotional pieces, maybe getting the actual fulfillment around, I want to give you my money and I'll take the payment in these different payment methods and giving you a status on the order. But frankly, this consumer experience with experience-driven commerce was not possible and is not possible with Magento alone. Truly experience-driven commerce is not possible with Magento alone. And obviously then I've made my purchase, I want to track it, I want to know how long till the bike gets delivered. It was a couple of months before I got it. I wanted updates, I wanted to know if there were parts out of stock that I requested. So there's a whole post-purchase. So this whole experience-driven commerce is tough. It's tough to get right, even if you have all the tools. And frankly, we are very confident now that with Adobe, we have the majority of the tools, right from the brand creating the content that starts at the awareness phase, all the way through to I've actually transacted and you know, I've become a customer of yours. So, what does this all mean from an integration and an architectural perspective for Adobe and Magento? Well, if you keep in mind this customer experience example I just gave you there, I think the product sets that come to mind most in the digital, the marketing cloud, digital experience business, there's advertising for that awareness phase, there's the marketing cloud products for the consideration and discovery phases, and these are the analytics which cuts across all of it. So what you're going to see is a lot of these core services around acquisition, conversion, retention, these Adobe products are the ones that will get integrated into Magento first and foremost. And I think I've got some quotes coming up in a little bit that I end on, and I think you saw the top level Adobe Magento guidance is that it's these products. It's going to be the obvious ones like Experience Manager, Target for testing, Analytics for what's going on the site, Audience Manager for, you know, if a product goes out of, is not selling well, what do we do today as a Magento site? You know, as a merchant running a Magento site? Well, we kind of run some analytics, we maybe run our MBI tool, but how do we act on that? Well, wouldn't it be great if we could have the DMP solution for Adobe, the Audience Manager, build a cohort of consumers who look like they might be interested in that product, run an outbound marketing campaign, whether it's display ads, whether it's email from the CRM database. There's a whole lot more we can be doing in commerce if we have access to these tools. So these are the things that I'm excited about as we start to work with Adobe more closely. So I'm not going to go through each one of these products, but my call to action here to you guys is if you are running a business involved with Magento, or either a Magento site, or whether you're a Magento partner, if you guys don't know what these products do and how they can add value, I encourage you to go and have a look, because this will be the differentiator between you and your competition, you and the other guy implementing the next Magento site. There's a lot of people who can implement a Magento site today, let's be clear. There's not a lot of people today that can use the full set of tools that are going to be available to you, and whether they're integrated today or whether that's loosely integrated via you know, web services that, you know, microservices that will continue to come, you know, there's a lot that can be done. And I know that some of you guys do this with other technologies and tools, but we're now going to have the benefit of being part of the same family. It's one discussion, eventually one product integration. Let's be clear, you know, Adobe was not completely oblivious to commerce as part of the experience. The Adobe's had experience integration with other commerce platforms as well. I'm here to tell you today that one of the things that I'm really excited about is that you can all be sure that Magento is going to be the first class and preferred solution for commerce when it comes to any Adobe customer going forward. So the commerce engine for all of these other products, and whether that is served up completely headless, or whether it's served up in some sort of hybrid model. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, but the microservices that form part of this commerce, what's now called the Commerce Integration Framework, you know, all of the core things, I don't know if you guys can see very well here, but, you know, product price calculation, you know, cross-selling, upselling, cart calculation, order splitting, these are all commerce-specific things that, frankly, no amount of Adobe experience can actually serve up. So they had to integrate. They were integrating with SAP Hybris. They were integrating with, you know, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. What I love about the fact is now that first choice is going to be Magento. It's going to be the first one that Adobe recommends. It's going to be the first one that's the most tightly integrated. So it can be done with other platforms, but Magento is just going to be the best way to do it. So these microservices are still new. There's beta releases coming out. We do have an early integration. As I said, it was existing before, but you know, the core commerce functionality is going to be there. And I think if you look at this, there's different, it's not black and white, right? I either do the experience, I either do commerce with Magento, or I do with some other platform, I do the experience here, there's a continuum of saying either these things are not at all integrated or they're completely tightly coupled and integrated. And I think this is going to be really, I think some of the points to call out here is, if you're not using Adobe Experience Manager, we can still do commerce all the way through to the Adobe experience can own the front-end experience, serve up the content, do the asset management, own the entire experience, and somewhere along the line is every customer will have its point that it makes the most sense. Maybe they have an existing infrastructure investment in Adobe products. Maybe they don't. Maybe because of the size of their business or their budget, they won't be able to afford all of the Adobe products, but maybe they can afford, some of them. So there's going to be a continuum here, and I just wanted to call out that when you think about these things, there's no black and white answers around when to use Magento, when to use Adobe. There's going to be a different set of parameters for each business. But the great thing is customers have choice. And the choice is going to be Magento first and foremost. It's then just how integrated they want to make their experiences on, is it more commerce-led, is it more experience-led? But ultimately, it's all going to be commerce through every experience for the Adobe team. So just to how we fit in to the overall messaging, we talk about awareness, discovery, consideration, the conversion at the point where a customer wants to give you money as a brand or as a business. That's where we see the Magento features and functionality and strengths come to play. So the true commerce, transactional, the order management, the payment and fulfillment pieces, those will certainly be the core of why Adobe purchased Magento, and we'll be focused on that. Just some more, just a quick snapshot on, this is a slide that Adobe puts up when they talk to analysts about why they made the acquisition. They want every experience to be shoppable. I mentioned that term earlier. They want, let's face it, there's a whole slew of smaller businesses that Adobe is typically sold to that Magento has been particularly strong in. So they see the way that Magento can scale from the small to mid-market all the way up to large enterprises is something they haven't necessarily had the option to, and we're going to continue to lead with that. Obviously, you guys know this. We talk about this in the Magento world. An average 6-month deployment time for a commerce solution is great. It's market leading, not what you're going to get with a Hybris or a Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Our unparalleled network of 300,000 developers, 300 systems integrators, over 3,000 extensions. These are all reasons why you get rapid time to value and why Adobe saw that and wanted to acquire that. So I just want to leave you very quickly, because I'm out of time, with what I thought were some interesting quotes that will guide your thinking or should guide all of our thinking around, and this is very, very true. Why the analysts, obviously, when an acquisition like this happens in an industry, they try to dissect the strengths, weaknesses, pros, cons, and here are some quotes that I thought were interesting. So this one from IDC, Magento Commerce fills an important gap, right? Everyone knew this in the industry. Adobe didn't have, versus its competitors, it didn't have a commerce solution. So the integrations they're thinking of that are going to be most important, Adobe Campaign, which is the email and marketing automation tool, content management, which is AEM, or Adobe Experience Manager, personalization through Adobe Test and Target, and targeting and analytics. So the other one from the same analyst, I think this is important because they called out that there was a long-standing integration there already, but now this commerce integration framework is going to enable, the strengths of the two to come together, and specifically AEM for digital asset management, merchandising, and full content experiences. And the last one, I think this is interesting, little overlap in the portfolio. Magento has BI, Adobe has analytics and intelligence tools too. There's a lightweight CMS, obviously the Bluefoot page builder experience I spoke about, but actually the likelihood for these to still play their part, but depending on the customer size, segment, requirement, the Adobe tools will be very complementary. So I encourage you to kind of do the research, do the reading. It's very hard for me, as I said up front, to give you a detailed product roadmap. Frankly, any software company I've worked for over the last 20-odd years, product roadmaps are kind of, it's really tough to kind of give specific guidance, but what I try to give you here across the last 30 minutes or so is just to say to you, the acquisition makes a lot of sense. It's an exciting time for anyone doing commerce because now we can go from good enough commerce to this personalized, fantastic experience-driven commerce. And we hope that you come on this journey with us. A lot of you are Magento partners. We hope to see you as Adobe partners going forward. The roadmap that I spoke about up front, that's still there. A lot of that stuff is set in motion, is happening in our next release and maybe next +1. So, it's not that all bets are off on the existing roadmap. And we look forward to, the near term, but also the longer term vision that hopefully how we fit into the overall Adobe experience business. So thank you for coming to listen, and any questions, come and grab me afterwards.